He's bipolar. I'm bipolar. It's just a family atmosphere. 3 weeks into the job, when I got General Hospital, I had my third nervous breakdown. But General Hospital did not fire me. They brought me back with open arms. Whatever you have, how hard it is, you can get through it. You just can't give up. There's always hope.
Here's your host, Roy Ice.
Are you tired of letting all the negativity around you affect your positivity? Yes. Yes, I'm speaking to the right crowd today. Well, today's guest knows all about how to reframe the bad into the good. Your favorite bad boy, multiple Daytime Emmy and Soap Opera Digest award winner, known for his role as Sonny Corinthos on General Hospital. Please welcome the one, the only, Maurice Benard. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Sit right here.
Yeah. So.
That's so white.
It is. Well, we look tan in here now, finally.
That's good. I'm all right.
Absolutely. 30 years. 30 years on General Hospital.
Yeah, half my life.
Half of your life.
Yeah.
In the same year that General Hospital is celebrating 60 years, their 60th anniversary. Congratulations, man. How does it feel to... I wouldn't know myself. I haven't done this for 30 years. So what's it like playing a character, a singular
Well, the character is a great character.
Yeah, he is.
He's bipolar. I'm bipolar. It's just a family atmosphere. So, I signed up for a 6-month role and said that I would leave when I got bored, and I never got bored. So I'm there for 30 years.
How is it that you never got bored?
Because the character's cool.
That's true. That's
right?
Is the character cool? Yes. Yes. You got some real fans here today.
I love that. Yeah.
That's awesome. So your character is kind of a mob boss.
Kind of.
A bad guy.
Yeah.
But you've made people completely love your character. How are you able to do that?
Well, I started the show. The character was bad, evil bad, and he did things that would not go over well now. They wouldn't allow it. And then I was there for a while, about 6 months. I said, I like it here, so I started changing the choices of the character. So, because I knew if I wanted to stay, he had to be liked.
Yeah. Because
in the beginning, they hated him. And then when I started changing it, they were like, I hate him, but there's something about him I kind of like, And I had to do it, and I did it, and it worked. And then they put me with Brenda, and that was it. History made.
Yeah, you mentioned that your character is bipolar. You yourself are bipolar. Did you decide to write that into your character? How did that all come about?
Well, 3 weeks into the job, when I got General Hospital, I had my third nervous breakdown. So I quit the show, and a lot of bad things happened. It's in my book. Nothing general about it. I was also on Oprah talking about when I threatened to kill my wife, and during a manic episode, and I was drinking, and it got really, really bad. But General Hospital did not fire me. They brought me back with open arms. And I'll never forget being in the room with one of the producers, Shelley Curtis, and I was crying like a baby, and I said, I can't do it. I can't remember a line. And she said, we will go page by page, line by line, word for word if we have to. And I was crying on her shoulder. And I'll never forget the walk going upstairs. It was like dead man walking. I didn't think I could act at all. And I got up there, and they didn't know me.
Yeah.
Now, if it happened, it would be, okay, Maurice having another breakdown.
It's a Tuesday.
Yeah. But I did it, man.
Wow.
Because, whatever you have, how hard it is, you can get through it. You just can't give up.
Yeah.
There's always hope.
I imagine there's millions of viewers every week watching this. There has to be a lot of people who have really been questioning themselves, you know, struggling with their own internal struggle, the fight of not knowing even whether they're bipolar or they're going through issues where they're like, I just don't feel like I'm under control. Tell me, what was your early experience? I mean, when were you diagnosed? Did you figure out there's something that I need to treat?
You know, when I was diagnosed at 21, my mom and dad, my brother, and my friends, they didn't know what the hell was going on with me. I was doing all kinds of, you know, stuff that wasn't normal.
Yeah.
And so my mom and dad, they put me into a mental institution, and I was in there for 2.5 weeks and tied down to a bed, my wrists, my waist, my ankles.
Wow.
And I remember my dad used to walk in and with my mom, and he'd have tears in his eyes because he didn't know what was his son doing on a bed in a room with 4 walls just tied down like an animal. But I went through it. You know, 2.5 weeks, and I escaped. It's no lie, you know. I was in there at 160, escaped from that hospital at 30 pounds less.
Wow.
Cops were after me, and I went home.
So during this time, in your mind, I'm sure you're trying to figure out, is there some way I can control this? Is there some way I can, you know, find balance in my life? What was this experience like? Because most people don't even understand. When you say bipolar, they're just like, ooh, there's an issue. They don't even know what's going on in your mind.
It's like, feels like a nightmare, and you can't wake up. And then you wake up, and you're back to normal, but then you go right back into the nightmare because you can't control it.
Yeah.
I don't care how hard you try. It takes you over.
Yeah.
And you know, and it's but the hard part for me isn't so much the manic, it's when you come down from the crash.
Right.
Then you're depressed, and
Yeah.
that's where you don't want to live anymore.
Yeah. They used to call bipolar manic depression.
That's what I was diagnosed with.
So you realize that, and you're diagnosed at age 21, you're going through manic depression, bipolar, but yet you still have these goals in your life of doing big things. What went through your mind as far as, I still want to accomplish this, but how do I, at the same time, not completely deep six myself with the manic depression?
That's a good question. I wanted to help people, and that's why I created State of Mind, because somebody watching, they hear us, they feel, you know, that's what I go through.
Yeah. And now they're no longer alone.
Exactly.
Awesome. I want to follow up on this, especially the therapeutic part, but we're going to take a break. And we are back with Maurice Benard, and now we're also joined by behavioral health physician-in-chief, Dr. Gary Small, to discuss what it's like living with bipolar disorder. And I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. Both of you were backstage in makeup, and your makeup looks amazing, by the way. Yeah, but couldn't help but overhear a conversation that you guys were talking about. What was the topic?
Maurice was telling me about a moment in his life where he felt like ending it. And it was very compelling. It's not uncommon for people who suffer from bipolar disorder to have feelings of suicide.
Well, you know, what's amazing is it had nothing to do with bipolar. It had to do all with anxiety and panic and fear.
Yeah.
The pandemic hit, and in my mind, it was the end of the world. The General Hospital shut down. I've been working for 30 years. I had a book that I was going to tour with in New York. I couldn't do that. And I remember my wife coming in telling me that that's not happening. I felt a cold rush inside me, and that night I started to shake, and that's never happened in everything that I've been through. So after that, I was like, I was done. I was just shut down. And I still had to promote the book on Zoom, which was very difficult because I'd be talking to Dr. Oz, you know, all the talk shows and stuff. And what I really wanted to say to them was, I'm dying. Save my life, please. But I knew if I did that, the cops would be at my door. So I just had to kind of just go through it. Finally, I met the psychiatrist, and I tell you the truth, because up until then, every moment of my life for 4 months, I was thinking of suicide,
Really?
doing myself in. So I went to this guy, and he said he subscribed Lexapro. And I'll tell you the truth, if Lexapro didn't work, I wouldn't be here. But Lexapro worked.
That's, you know, it's a very compelling story, and it just demonstrates how this illness takes over your brain.
Yeah.
And you lose judgment, and it can happen during the high points where you're expansive, or during the low points, or in between. And there was something about everything being canceled, everything stopping, that you just felt like giving up.
What was the shaking?
Well, a lot of times when we have overwhelming emotional experiences, it becomes physical. I mean, our minds and our bodies are very closely connected. And I've seen that before, people under extreme anxiety, depression, where they just start to shake. Now, the good news is that you got some treatment. And this is a devastating illness, but we know how to treat it. And people do get better if they have the insight and the support where they can get help.
Good, well, very well said.
So how would a family member recognize in their loved ones the symptoms, some of the signals that their loved one is going through this?
Well, the illness, you know, bipolar, it talks about being at two polar ends of our moods, from being down and really depressed and slowed down, to being very high and manic and expansive. And these are cycles that people go through. So they may have normal periods, but in certain times in their lives, you, when you're a young man, it first manifested itself, you see the behavior has changed, where people are, during a manic episode, you start talking fast, you have, it's called flight of ideas, and you're very productive. In fact, there's a phase called hypomania, where it's not too severe, but you're very productive at getting a lot done. And in fact, people who are creative, artists, writers, there's a higher risk of having bipolar disorder. Really? Because during that hypomanic phase, they're quite productive. The problem is, when it gets extreme, they lose touch with reality. They don't sleep. They make terrible errors in judgment, where they spend all their money. They go on trips to different places. All kinds of very unusual behavior.
Well, I saw you shaking your head a lot, saying yes.
Yeah, I know how I'm doing by how I'm sleeping. You should put that in a t-shirt. If I'm not sleeping well, if I'm waking up in the middle of the night having panic attacks, or I need to figure that out. I need to get help. If I'm, you know, if I can't take a nap, or, you know, I have sleep apnea. I have everything. All those commercials, you know, those commercials
You're
on
like,
TV?
I need that one too.
If you have sleep apnea, if you have bipolar 1, I have them all, okay? So sleep is a big deal for me.
Well, you know, it's interesting how you have the insight to recognize when things aren't quite right, and to know to get help. And this happens not just with the patient who's suffering from the illness, but also people close to you, probably family members, know when you're not quite right and you need some help.
Like, how widespread is this? Who's at risk of?
Well, you know, it's not as widespread as you might think. Only about 1 or 2% of the population suffers from this. But there is a genetic component. So if there's somebody in your family who suffers from it, that increases your own risk for suffering from it.
Wow, that's some great information, but we have to take a break. And we are back with our guest, Maurice Benard and Dr. Gary Small, and now joined by our relationship key expert, Mike Tucker. And Mike, I want to start with you because especially being an expert in relationships, you've probably had to deal a lot with families that have a member who is going through a struggle with a mental disorder or something. What's the effect, and are there any solutions you found that keep those bonds strong?
You know, relationships are difficult enough without adding the mental health component to it. But especially untreated, it becomes devastating for relationships. Treated is manageable, but without the treatment, it becomes devastating. I'm sure you found this in your practice and your studies as well.
Yeah, it's so important to educate people about the illness, because it's human nature to get defensive and upset when you see your loved one acting differently. But if you understand it's an illness not unlike a physical illness where the person has no control over it, it puts it in perspective and it empowers the family members.
Absolutely.
I have teenage boys, you know, going to junior high and high school, and we've recognized if we put a name on it, well, then my kid has a disability. And, you know, what would you suggest to someone who's going through this challenge of saying, I don't want my kid to have a diagnosis?
Well, there's still tremendous stigma about mental illness, and people are afraid of it. I'm a psychiatrist. They're afraid of me. They think I'm going to look right through them or stare right at them.
You're the one on the couch. I'm not on the couch today.
So, you know, I think that's unfortunate because the reality is that this is something affecting us all. And I mean, we definitely saw it from the pandemic where the rates of mental illness went way up. And I think there's greater acceptance of the problems. People need to realize there's nothing to be ashamed of, and help is there. But it's really an issue of having the, you know, to be brave enough to come out and say, I need help.
Yeah. Maurice, you're the spokesperson for an incredible organization. How does this help people to deal with even what we were talking about here about overcoming the stigma and helping people truly find hope and relief?
Well, yeah, Mental Health of America is incredible, and I'll do anything they want. And I work with a lot of different organizations. When I first started in acting, I was told not to talk about it because I wouldn't get hired. People think I'm going to go crazy on the set.
Yeah.
So I did this little article just for the hell of it. And this boy wrote me a letter. In those days, it was not social media. And he said, by reading what you went through, it's helped me get through my brother's suicide. He took a gun and took his life. After that, I said, I don't care about being hired. I'm going to talk about this, and I haven't shut up for about over 30 years.
Wonderful.
It's awesome.
Congratulations for that.
That is true bravery, but it's also just that the most loving, caring thing you can do for humanity is say, I'm here for you. You're not alone in this.
That not alone is a big deal, and I'll tell you why. Let me just say this real quick. During the pandemic, when I was it was about that time that I was ready to go, right? I prayed to God, and the first thing that came to my mind was my family, and what would happen if I did myself in the state of all the people that follow me on state of mind or whatever, they would think it's okay. And I didn't obviously go through with it, and thank God.
Yeah. Oh, we're all very thankful.
Absolutely. Maurice, your willingness to talk about your diagnosis and your struggles, I think is again, one of the bravest things you can do. But that vulnerability, has that impacted your family in a negative way, or has it been positive with them?
That's a great question, because this last time I remember, because I'd always go into my wife and I would crying like a baby. I said, I can't do it. I'm not gonna be able to go through it. And she'd always, I felt towards the end that it was really affecting her.
Yes.
Usually she's strong and everything, but when I'd walk in, she's like, oh boy, you know. But she'd always say, you are stronger than you know. I even got t-shirts coming that say, you are stronger than you know. And she's always been right. And we are stronger than we know, right? I'm not the strong guy that appears on General Hospital who's, you know, a gangster. I'm just a little fragile little guy who can't do it, but he does it. So anybody can do it.
I am absolutely convinced that you have helped so many people to realize they're not alone in what they're going through. Thank you so much for being part of this show. We have to take a break right now, but when we come back, I have some incredible secrets that will change your life. Your mind is your greatest weapon, and it can be used for you or against you. That's because your mind aims at whatever you say is your target. That's why if your sights are set on audacious goals or on helping other people in need, your mind can blast away all of the obstacles that are in the way of your destiny. But if your mind is focused on yourself, It can't help but blast holes in your places of greatest flaws, weaknesses, and wants. All you see is that you don't have the things that you need or want. A mind focused on itself is destructive, but a mind that has its lens focused on the needs around it will always find ways to serve mankind, and in doing so, will help you to shed your flaws, strengthen your weaknesses, and diminish your self-centered wants. And remember, you're only one decision away from your best lifestyle. You can make it.